Welcome to a story told in the quiet hours. A story not of loud battles, though they are present, but of deeper, more resonant themes. A story of forgotten dreams, of cosmic beings that loom in the spaces between the stars, and of a profound, universal longing for a child. Tonight, we will explore the layered and somber lore of Bloodborne. We will set aside the frantic energy of the hunt and instead walk slowly through the foggy streets of Ihanam, piecing together a narrative from old notes, item descriptions, and the whispers of ghosts. Our focus is on the Great Ones, the pivotal entities that shape this world from behind the veil, and the tragic cycle of loss that defines their existence, and in turn, the fate of all who seek them. This is a tale best suited for the quiet of the night, a long story to sleep to. Imagine, if you will, a place where the air is thick with the smell of salt and decay, where the constant, gentle lapping of waves against a rocky shore is the only rhythm that time follows. This is the Fishing Hamlet, or what remains of it, a place hidden from the world, cradled by a sea that is not quite water and a sky that is not quite sky. Before the scholars came, it must have been a place of quiet harmony, a settlement built not on ambition, but on acceptance. The huts, weathered by endless storms, clung to the cliffs like barnacles, their wooden beams groaning with the weight of centuries. The villagers, their faces etched by the wind and their eyes holding the deep, placid darkness of the abyssal plains, lived their lives in tune with the tides. They did not hunt for sport or for glory. They fished, they mended their nets, they told stories by the light of driftwood fires. And in all things, they paid homage to the presence that dwelled in the deep, the being they called Kos, or as some of the more philosophical among them might whisper, Cosm. She was not a god of wrath or judgment, but a mother, a provider, a vast and gentle intelligence that had chosen to rest her weary form in the depths near their home. Her arrival was not an invasion, but a settling, a symbiotic relationship where her cosmic dreams enriched the waters and the villagers. In their simple, profound faith, acted as her caretakers, her children. The air itself hummed with a low, resonant frequency, the sound of a sleeping god's breath, and the strange, phosphorescent shellfish that washed ashore were seen not as monstrosities, but as blessings, little pieces of her divine essence. This fragile, sacred balance was shattered by the arrival of men from Byrgenwerth, their minds ablaze with a different kind of fire, the fire of inquiry, of a desperate need to know, to see, to possess the unknowable. They did not arrive with weapons drawn at first. They arrived with scrolls and measuring tools, their eyes wide not with wonder, but with avarice disguised as scholarship. They saw the villagers not as people, but as specimens, living relics touched by a power they could scarcely comprehend. They saw the blessings of Kos not as gifts, but as evidence, as resources to be catalogued and exploited. And then they found her. Kos, the mother from the sea, washed upon the shore. Whether her death was a natural conclusion to a cosmic life cycle, or a quiet tragedy of the deep, or something far more sinister that the scholars themselves had a hand in, is a secret the waves have kept. But what is known, what echoes through the nightmare with the clarity of a tolling bell, is what happened next. The transgression, the act that would become the original sin, the foundational crime upon which an entire civilization's nightmare would be built. They violated the corpse. With tools of cold steel and colder intellect, they opened her up, they peered inside, they harvested. They sought the eyes, the fabled insight, the very medium of cosmic contact, and in their frantic search, they tore it from her sacred flesh. And the villagers, her children, were not spared. They were hunted, not for sport, but for study, dissected while still breathing, their skulls opened and their brains examined for any trace of the phantasms they had communed with. This was not research, it was a desecration, a slaughterhouse masquerading as a laboratory. The hunters, Jayaman and his protégé, the Lady Maria, were there. They were the instruments of this atrocity. Their blades, once used to cull beasts, now turned upon these peaceful, enlightened people. It was a sin that soaked into the very soil, into the spiritual bedrock of the world. A curse that would not simply fade with time, but would instead fester and grow, creating a realm of its own, a prison for the guilty, a nightmare born from a single, unforgivable moment of violation. And at the heart of this violation was Kos herself, the mother from the cosmic depths. To understand her is to try and comprehend a form of life so alien, so fundamentally other, that our language strains to contain it. She was not of the stars, like the moon presence with its cold, cyclical dominion over the hunt. She was of the ocean, a being of immense, fluid pressure and lightless quiet. Her body, even in death, was a landscape, a vast, pale coastline of flesh and strange, calcified growths that resembled coral more than bone. Her presence was one of nurturing abundance, a generosity that asked for nothing in return but reverence. The symbiotic relationship with the hamlet was a perfect, closed loop. Her dreams fed the sea fed the villagers, and the villagers' faith, their simple, unwavering belief, sustained her in turn. It was a form of worship devoid of dogma, a natural communion. The circumstances of her death are the first great mystery. Did she simply expire, a leviathan reaching the end of its eons-long life, beaching herself near the only home she had ever known? Or was her death the culmination of the scholar's ambition? Was she, in her vulnerable state, somehow targeted, her life extinguished to provide them with the ultimate specimen? The evidence is ambiguous, written in whispers and half-truths. What is undeniable is the state of her body. Within her, they found the old blood, but it was not pure. It was a holy medium, yes, the very substance that would grant humanity a glimpse of the cosmos and found the healing church, but it was infected. It teemed with tiny, wriggling parasites, vermin that were as much a part of her as her blood and sinew. This is a profound and deeply unsettling philosophical concept. The source of a miraculous, enlightenment-bringing substance was a dead, parasitized God. The very foundation of the Church's healing, of its power and its transcendence, was built upon a corpse and tainted with a fundamental impurity. It speaks to a universe where nothing is purely good, where every ascent is paid for with a corresponding descent into horror, where the price of touching the divine is to be stained by its reality, a reality that includes decay, infestation, and death. From this union of death and violation, a new life was violently ushered into existence. The Orphan of Kos. Its very being is a paradox, a contradiction that should not be. It was born from a mother who was already dead, a being that entered the world not through a cry of life, but through the silence of a grave. It is both newborn, raw and helpless, and ancient, carrying the immeasurable weight of its lineage and its tragic origin. Its physical form is a testament to this impossible state. It has the limbs of an infant, thin and fragile, yet it moves with the jerky, powerful desperation of something much older. Its skin is pale and translucent, like the belly of a deep-sea fish, and its back is hunched, as if carrying the burden of the sky. Its face is a wizened, sorrowful mask, and from its hands it wields not a man-made weapon, but the raw, pulsating essence of its mother's power, the placenta, a grotesque and heartbreaking instrument that is both a part of its own body and a relic of the mother it never knew. The orphan does not rule the hunter's nightmare, it is the nightmare. It is the anchor, the weeping, screaming heart of that tormented realm. Its existence is the source of the curse, its unending grief the fuel that sustains the entire dreadful landscape. If you listen carefully, beneath the screams of the blood-drunk hunters and the crackle of the eternal fire, you can hear it, a constant, low, whimpering cry. It is the foundational sound of that place, a note of pure, inconsolable sorrow that has been playing on an endless loop since the moment of its birth. The orphan is not a malevolent deity seeking vengeance. It is a child born into a world of pain, a world that murdered its mother and violated its home. Its rage is the rage of innocence betrayed. Its grief is the grief of a love it never received. It is a vessel, overflowing with an emotion so vast and so pure that it has physically and spiritually manifested as a prison for an entire lineage of sinners. This prison is the hunter's nightmare, a landscape that is not merely a place, but a living, breathing manifestation of a collective, gnawing guilt. It is a dimension where sin has been given form, where the consequences of the healing churches and the hunter's actions are etched into the very geography. To walk through, it is to take a tour through a gallery of their crimes, each area a different exhibit of their folly. The burning, eternal Ihanam of the nightmare is the first and most obvious reflection. Here, the hunt never ends. The streets are perpetually choked with smoke and the scent of old blood. The beasts are more frenzied, more numerous, and the hunters trapped here are doomed to repeat their violent work forever, their minds lost to the very blood drunkenness they sought to cultivate. It is the hunt stripped of its purpose and reduced to its most base, addictive, and horrific essence, an endless, meaningless cycle of violence. Deeper within lies the research hall, a monument to the church's inhuman curiosity. This is where the philosophical pursuit of enlightenment curdled into grotesque, bodily experimentation. The twisted, malformed patients, their heads swollen and their bodies contorted, are living testaments to the arrogance that sought to force insight upon the human form. Their pitiful cries and confused ramblings are the echoes of a science that forgot its humanity, a place where the line between patient and experiment was utterly erased. And finally, after ascending the astral clock tower, one arrives at the source. The transition is jarring, a sudden shift from the structured, architectural horror of the church's legacy to the raw, natural desolation of the fishing hamlet. The air changes, becoming heavy and wet. The gray, churning sea stretches out to a horizon lost in mist, and the ruined huts stand as solemn tombstones. This is the epicenter of the sin, the wound that never healed. The temporal distortion of the nightmare is most potent here. It is not the past, nor is it the present. It is the eternal now of the transgression. The moment of the massacre is forever happening. The spiritual anguish of the villagers is a permanent fixture of the atmosphere, and the corpse of Kos still lies upon the shore, a perpetual, accusatory monument. The entire nightmare functions as a purgatory, a specially designed hell for blood-drunk hunters, forcing them to wander through the consequences of their actions, to see the beastly scourge they helped unleash, the lives they ruined in their experiments, and ultimately to confront the weeping child at the very root of it all. A child whose suffering is the direct result of the path they chose to walk. The sea here does not whisper, it murmurs with the voices of the drowned. Each wave that collapses upon the black, pebbled shore carries with it the faint, sibilant echoes of prayers offered to a now silent deity, the choked final breaths of the dissected, and the slow, patient creak of the fishing boats that will never again be launched. The salt in the air is so thick it coats the tongue, a briny film that tastes of tears and ancient rot. This is a place where memory has congealed into substance, where the past is not a story to be told, but a physical law as immutable as gravity. To stand on this shore is to feel the weight of that singular, catastrophic event pressing down upon your soul, a pressure as immense and inescapable as the ocean's depths. The sky is a dome of bruised, purplish gray, a perpetual twilight that offers no promise of dawn or solace of night, only the endless, gloomy pall of a sin that cannot be absolved. Strange, bioluminescent algae cling to the rocks, casting a sickly, greenish glow that does not illuminate, but rather deepens the shadows, making them seem alive and watchful. The villages, or what remains of them, are now more ghost than flesh. They are the hamlet's eternal residents, their forms twisted and elevated by the lingering power of Kos, transformed into kin of the very cosmos they revered. They shamble through the mist, their bodies bloated and misshapen, their heads elongated and bearing the distinct, fish-like features of deep-sea dwellers. They do not speak in words, but in guttural clicks and low, mournful groans that seem to vibrate through the wet air. They are not hostile out of malice, but out of a deeply ingrained, instinctual defense of their home, their mother, their violated sanctity. To look into their large, black, unblinking eyes is to see not beastly frenzy, but a profound and unsettling intelligence, an ancient sorrow that has calcified into a permanent state of being. They are the living witnesses, the chorus of this tragedy, and their every movement is a lamentation. Some still go through the motions of their old lives, one endlessly mending a net that has long since turned to rot, another rocking back and forth in a chair outside a collapsed hut, its rhythm keeping time with the breaking waves. They are trapped in the ritual of their former existence, a pantomime of peace that only underscores the violence that shattered it. And at the center of it all, beached upon a stretch of shore where the pebbles are stained a dark, oily color, lies the immense, silent form of Kos. Her body is a geography of loss. The pale, weathered flesh stretches over a frame of impossible scale, resembling the bleached carcass of a whale crossed with the intricate, branching structures of some celestial coral. Up close, the texture of her skin is not smooth, but complex and layered, like the sediment of a seabed exposed after 1,000,000 years. Strange, phosphorescent fungi and barnacles of a non-terrestrial kind cling to her, pulsing with a soft, internal light. The wound, the great, yawning incision left by the scholars, is not a clean cut. It is a ragged tear, a violent rupture that gapes open like a second mouth, silent and accusing. From within, a faint, otherworldly luminescence still seeps, the last fading ember of her cosmic life. The air around her is unnaturally still and cold, a pocket of absolute silence where even the constant murmur of the sea seems to hush in reverence. This is the altar upon which the dream of Byrgenwerth was built, the foundational sacrifice for an empire of knowledge. To stand before her is to understand the true cost of that ambition, to see that every vial of healing blood, every scrap of eldritch wisdom, every frantic grasp at transcendence was purchased with the desecration of this one, peaceful being. It is a sight that strips away any romance from the pursuit of the unknown, revealing it for what it so often is: a brutal, selfish act of consumption. The orphan, in its restless, agonized wandering, always returns to this spot. It is drawn to the corpse as a planet is drawn to its sun, locked in a gravitational pull of grief. It does not look upon its mother with understanding, for it possesses the raw, unformed consciousness of a newborn. Its connection is primal, instinctual, a deep, cellular knowledge of loss, of a presence that should be warm and nurturing, but is instead cold and still. Its cries, which range from the pitiful whimpers of a babe to the earth-shaking roars of a titan, are not just expressions of its own pain, but are also a form of communication, a desperate attempt to elicit a response from the silent Leviathan. It pounds its placenta weapon against the ground, not in a display of power, but in a fit of infantile frustration, a tantrum thrown against a universe that has denied it its birthright of a mother's love. The tragedy of the orphan is layered, a nesting doll of sorrows. It is an orphan not just in the literal sense, but in a cosmic one. It is severed from its lineage, a singular being with no kin, no kindred in all the vast, cold expanse of the cosmos. The other great ones, like the formless Edon or the distant moon presence, are solitary by their nature. But the Orphan's solitude is one of violent severance. It is a child of a unique union between the ocean's depth and the stars, and its existence is a lonely, screaming question mark in the dark. This profound, foundational loneliness is the engine of the hunter's nightmare. The realm is not a passive creation. It is a sympathetic resonance, a psychic feedback loop generated by the Orphan's ceaseless suffering. Its grief is so potent, so pure in its anguish, that it warps reality around itself, pulling in the spirits of those whose actions contributed to its plight. The blood-drunk hunters are not merely punished here. They are made to participate in the Orphan's pain. Their endless hunt is a reflection of the Orphan's own endless search for solace. The burning streets of Ihanam, the grotesque failures of the research hall, the desolate shore of the hamlet, these are not just scenes from a crime. They are the very landscape of the Orphan's psyche, externalized for all to see and be consumed by. The hunters are forced to walk through the mind of the child they orphaned, to feel the echoes of its betrayal and loss as their own. It is a punishment far more sophisticated and cruel than simple physical torment. It is an empathic damnation, a sentence to understand on a visceral level the full breadth of the tragedy they helped enact. The act of confronting the Orphan, therefore, is not a simple boss fight in the traditional sense. It is a ritual of closure, an exorcism of a world's guilt. When a hunter, steeped in the blood and insight of the nightmare, finally stands before the weeping child on that desolate shore, they are not facing a monster. They are facing a consequence. The battle is chaotic, desperate, and deeply sad. The Orphan moves with a jerky, unpredictable agony, its attacks less like martial forms and more like the flailing of a traumatized infant magnified to a cataclysmic scale. It leaps and shrieks, hurling bolts of lightning that crackle with its own raw, emotional pain. The placenta in its hand is a horrifying weapon, a piece of its own origin that it uses to bludgeon the world that hurt it. To fight it is to participate in its rage, to become a part of its tantrum. And when it falls, when its small, pale form finally goes still upon the wet stones, the cry it lets out is not one of defeat, but of release. It is a long, shuddering sigh that seems to drain the tension from the very air. The constant, low-frequency hum of the nightmare falters. The oppressive weight lessens, if only for a moment. In the silence that follows, a profound and unsettling peace descends upon the fishing hamlet. The sea's murmur softens, losing its accusatory edge. The gray light seems to warm infinitesimally, as if a cloud has passed from in front of a hidden sun. The Orphan's form begins to dissipate, not into nothingness, but into a fine, ethereal mist that rises and is carried away on the sea breeze, returning to the cosmos from which it came. It is a quiet, gentle end for a being that knew only violence and sorrow. And as it fades, a final, spectral whisper seems to echo across the shore, a single word carried on the salt-laden wind. Mother. It is not a cry of anguish this time, but a word of longing, a final, plaintive call into the void. With its passing, the curse is broken. The nightmare, having served its purpose as a vessel for this concentrated grief, begins to unravel at its edges. The hunters trapped within feel the psychic chains that bound them loosen. The endless hunt finally finds its end. The hamlet is left as it was, a place of quiet desolation, but the screaming heart of its torment has been stilled. The sin remains etched forever into history, but the festering wound has been cleansed, allowed to finally scar over. The body of Kos, however, does not vanish. It remains on the shore, a permanent, silent monument. The release of the orphan did not resurrect her. It merely laid her child to rest. She is the enduring evidence, the stark, physical reminder that some transgressions are so profound that their consequences ripple through reality itself, creating nightmares and cursing lineages, and that the only solace to be found is not in undoing the past, but in finally, mercifully, allowing its most tormented victims to find peace. The silence that follows the orphan's release is not the silence of absence, but of a breath held too long finally being exhaled. It hangs in the salt-thick air, a palpable, living quiet that seems to absorb the very sound of the waves, turning their constant crash into a distant, muffled heartbeat. The mist, which had clung to everything with a desperate, wet grip, begins to thin. It does not vanish, but retreats, pulling back from the shoreline like a veil being slowly drawn aside, revealing the stark, beautiful desolation it had concealed. The light, that perpetual, gloomy twilight, undergoes a subtle transformation. It is no longer the bruised purple gray of a fresh wound, but softens into the color of a faded pearl or the inside of a vast, ancient shell. It is a light that holds no warmth, yet lacks the biting chill of despair. It is simply the light of what remains of a world after the storm has passed. On the shore, the pebbles underfoot seem less sharp, their edges smoothed by this new, gentle atmosphere. The phosphorescent algae that clung to the rocks dim their eerie glow, their light fading from a sickly green to a soft, blue luminescence, like the remembered light of forgotten stars. The air itself feels easier to breathe. The oppressive weight, the psychic pressure that had made every step a labor, has lifted. One can stand upright without feeling the burden of the sky pressing down upon their shoulders. The very texture of the world has changed. Where before it felt like a festering wound, now it feels like a scar, tough, resilient, and bearing the memory of pain, but no longer bleeding. The ghostly villagers sense this shift immediately. Their endless, mournful pacing slows. The one who was forever mending the rotten net pauses, its webbed hands stilling over the frayed cords. It looks up, its large, black eyes reflecting the softened light, and for a moment, the guttural clicking in its throat ceases. There is no sudden joy, no celebration, for such concepts are foreign to this place of eternal sorrow. Instead, there is a profound sense of cessation. The constant, grinding agony that had been the background noise of their existence has stopped. They do not resume their pantomime of life with renewed vigor. Rather, they seem to settle into their forms, their movements becoming less frantic, more deliberate, as if they are finally, truly resting. They are not freed. Their fate is inextricably tied to this shore. But the reason for their torment has been acknowledged, and in that acknowledgement, a kind of balm has been applied to their spiritual wounds. They become less like tormented specters and more like solemn guardians, their watchfulness no longer charged with defensive hostility, but with a deep, abiding, and peaceful vigilance. And Kos remains. Her colossal form, beached upon the dark-stained pebbles, is the anchor of this new quiet. The ragged, surgical wound upon her torso seems less like a violent tear and more like a geological feature, a canyon carved by time and tragedy. The faint luminescence that seeped from it has now fully faded, leaving behind a darkness that is not empty, but profound. It is the darkness of a temple after the deity has departed, a space that is still holy by virtue of what it once contained. The strange, coral-like growths on her body appear more intricate now, their patterns clearer in the softened light, resembling frozen constellations or the branching pathways of a vast, dormant neural network. To touch her skin is to feel not the chill of death, but the cool, smooth solidity of marble or ancient ivory. She is no longer a corpse in the process of decay, but a monument that has achieved a state of permanence. She has been translated from a being into a place, from a mother into a memory given stone and sinew. This transformation raises a quiet, philosophical question that hangs in the air alongside the salt spray. What is the legacy of a god? Is it in the miracles they perform, the followers they gather, the doctrines written in their name? For Kos, her legacy was never in grand displays of power. It was in the quiet symbiosis of a fishing village, in the abundance of the sea, in the simple, unwavering faith of her children. And then, it was in the blood, the old blood, tainted with parasites, that became the source of both transcendence and scourge. Her legacy is duality itself. Life and death, healing and disease, enlightenment and madness, all flowing from the same sacred source. Her body, now this eternal monument, is a testament to that impossible contradiction. She is the silent heart of a paradox, and the world of Ihanam, with its soaring cathedrals and beast-ridden streets, is the living, breathing expression of that paradox. The Healing Church, in all its gothic splendor, is a cathedral built upon this silent, alien shore, though its priests would never know it. Every chime of a church bell in the waking world is an echo, however faint, of the waves that break against her still form. As the hunter's nightmare begins its slow, graceful dissolution, the connections between this cursed realm and the waking world become more apparent, like threads of a tapestry becoming visible as it is unpicked. The blood-drunk hunters, their eyes clearing of the frenzied red mist, look upon the fading horrors around them not with fear, but with a dawning, terrible clarity. They remember their lives, their hunts, their sins. They see the burning Ihanam not as their playground, but as their punishment. They feel the weight of the research hall's failures not as a scholar's curiosity, but as a personal shame. The nightmare, in its final moments, grants them the one thing it had denied them: understanding. It is not a forgiving understanding, nor does it absolve them. It is a stark, unforgiving mirror held up to their souls, and in it they see the full chain of causality that led from their blades to the weeping often on the shore. This final, empathic revelation is the true end of their punishment. Some simply fade away, their spirits finally exhausted, finding a true death in this clarity. Others let out sighs of profound relief, their forms dissipating into the lightening air, released from the cycle they were trapped in. The landscape itself unravels with a dreamlike logic. The astral clock tower, that impossible engine of time and suffering, begins to lose its solidity. Its gears slow, their relentless ticking faltering into irregular, sluggish clicks before falling silent altogether. The brass and stone of its construction become translucent, like mist viewed through a pane of glass. And then they are simply gone, leaving behind only the memory of their imposing height. The burning city of Ihanam below flickers, the flames dying down not to embers, but to nothingness, as if they were only ever a painting of fire. The beasts, caught mid-snarl, dissolve into shadows that are swiftly scattered by a wind that now smells only of the sea, cleansed of smoke and old blood. It is not a violent collapse, but a gentle forgetting, a world being meticulously erased from the bottom up. Yet, the Fishing Hamlet is the last to go. It is the root, the sauce, and it holds onto its reality with a tenacious grip. The cliffs remain, the huts, though ruined, retain their shape for a while longer, and the sea continues its eternal rhythm against the shore. But even here, the change is evident. The temporal distortion, the feeling of being trapped in an eternal, agonizing present, relaxes. The moment of the massacre is over. It has passed into history, its sharp, screaming pain blunted by time and the orphan's release. The hamlet exists now as a memorial, a sacred gravesite in the cosmos. The whispers in the waves are no longer the screams of the dying, but have become a wordless, elegiac song, a lullaby for a sleeping child and its departed mother. In the waking world, far removed from this dissolving dream, a hunter might stir by a lantern, the memory of the shore already fading like a dream upon waking. They would feel different, though they might not know why. The blood they carry would feel less like a raging fire in their veins and more like a quiet, potent knowledge. The hunt would continue, the beasts would still prowl, the moon presence would still cast its pale light over the dream. But something fundamental in the metaphysical architecture of their reality would have shifted. A foundational curse, one that had poisoned the very concept of the hunt, had been lifted. The endless cycle had been shown a possible end. It was not a victory, for how can one claim victory over a tragedy? It was a reconciliation. A debt not paid but acknowledged. A wound not healed but cleansed and allowed to close. And high above, in the cosmos that the great ones call home, Perhaps a new note was introduced into the silent, cold symphony of the stars. It was not the note of a birth, nor of a death, but of a resolution. The long, solitary cry of the orphan had ceased. The sympathetic vibration of its grief, which had warped a pocket of reality into a hell for hunters, was still. In the immense, indifferent calculus of the universe, one variable of profound suffering had been balanced. The great ones are sympathetic in spirit, and they often answer when called upon. Perhaps, in the quiet that followed, one of them, a being of the moon or of the blood or of some unseen dimension, turned a fraction of its attention toward that desolate, rocky shore now fading from existence. Perhaps it perceived the end of that particular song of sorrow. And perhaps, in its own inscrutable way, it understood that the human capacity for transgression is matched only by its capacity for atonement, and that even in a godless cosmos, the act of laying a child to rest is a ritual of immense, quiet power. The story of Kos and her orphan was over, but its echoes would ripple through the dreams of hunters and the halls of scholars for generations to come. A somber lesson written not in ink, but in blood, silence, and the enduring patience of the sea. The new silence of the hamlet is a thing of layers, each one thinner and more delicate than the last. The first layer is the absence of the orphan's weeping, a sound so fundamental to the place that its cessation leaves a void, an auditory negative space that the environment slowly, hesitantly, begins to fill. The second layer is the quieting of the villagers' lamentations, their guttural clicks and groans softening into a communal, breath-like sigh that sinks with the tide. The third, and most profound, is the silencing of the metaphysical scream, the high-pitched, psychic frequency of raw, unadulterated grief that had been the very mortar binding this nightmare together. With that gone, the world feels unmoored, adrift, like a ship whose anchor has been hauled up after centuries on the seabed, finally free to move with the currents. The sea itself is the primary narrator of this new chapter. Its waves, which once crashed upon the shore with the fury of a betrayed child, now roll in with a slow, measured cadence, each one a sentence in a long, concluding paragraph. The water, once a churning, ink-black fury, now appears as a vast expanse of liquid lead, its surface reflecting the pearlescent, shell-like quality of the sky with a perfect, mournful clarity. Where before it seemed to boil with malevolent energy, now it is preternaturally calm, its movements heavy with a final, exhausted acceptance. If one were to kneel at the water's edge and submerge a hand, the sensation would not be one of biting cold, but of a deep, penetrating coolness, the temperature of a relic stored in a cathedral's crypt. The salt no longer stings open wounds, it preserves them. The peculiar, phosphorescent life that once swarmed in the shallows, the writhing, worm-like creatures and the pulsating, anemone-like growths, have all retreated to the abyssal plains. They have returned to the deep, their purpose as blessings or curses now fulfilled, leaving the waters strangely, hauntingly empty. A blank page after a tragic story has been written upon it. The villagers, in their newfound stillness, become more like sculptures than specters. Their fish-like features, once twisted in agony, seem to relax into expressions of a deep, abyssal patience. Their large, black eyes, which held the terror of the massacre, now reflect only the quiet sea and the soft sky. They do not look at an intruder with fear or rage, but with a kind of ancient, knowing acknowledgement. They are the librarians of this tragedy, the silent curators of a museum with only one exhibit. One of them, the one who had eternally mended the net, slowly, deliberately, lets the rotten fibers slip from its webbed fingers. It does not pick them up again. Instead, it turns its gaze out to the horizon, its posture one of a sentinel who has, at long last, seen the enemy depart. Their presence is no longer a threat. It is a part of the landscape, as natural and unchangeable as the cliffs themselves. They are the living stone of this memorial, their very flesh a recording of the event that defined them. And all paths, all lines of sight, lead back to Kos. Her presence now dominates not through active power, but through passive, overwhelming significance. She is the still point of the turning world, the fixed star around which this entire reality once revolved. Up close, the scale of her is even more humbling. One could walk for minutes along the length of a single, pale rib, its curve like the vault of a celestial cathedral. The texture of her skin is a complex topography of ridges and valleys, of smooth, worn plains and strange, ossified outcroppings that gleam with a soft, internal pearlescence, as if absorbing and softening the feeble light. The air around her is the most silent of all. Sound seems to die here, absorbed by the immense, quiet dignity of her form. It is a silence that is not empty, but full, saturated with the echoes of what was lost. It is the silence of a breath held at the moment of death, now finally, eternally released. This is the true, final state of the great one known as Kos. She is no longer a being who was, but a concept that is. She is the embodiment of the price of knowledge, the physical law that for every ascent there must be a corresponding, and often horrific, descent. The parasites that teemed within her blood, the very sauce of the healing church's scourge, were not a flaw or an impurity in the philosophical sense. They were an integral part of her nature, a symbol of the universe's indivisible duality. To receive her blood was to receive both the blessing of insight and the curse of the vermin. One could not be separated from the other. Her body, now this eternal monument, makes this truth inescapable. She is the ultimate rebuttal to the arrogant notion of pure, untainted transcendence. She teaches, in her vast and silent way, that to touch the divine is to accept its entirety, its nurturing abundance and its parasitic decay, its life-giving power and its deathly stillness. As the hunter's nightmare continues its dissolution, the process becomes less about things vanishing and more about them becoming transparent, revealing the layers of reality beneath. The astral clock tower does not crumble. It becomes a ghost of itself, its formidable brass and stone turning to smoky glass, through which one can see the swirling, formless energies of the cosmos that underpin all dreams. The burning city of Ihanam is revealed to be a painting on a vast, thin canvas. And now that canvas is being gently burned away at the edges by a cool, clean light, revealing the infinite, star-dusted void behind it. The research halls tortured patience, their forms writhing in eternal confusion, slowly still. Their misshapen bodies lose their solidity, their anguished cries fading into a collective, whispered sigh of understanding before they, too, fade into the light, their personal nightmares finally at an end. It is a decreation, a meticulous unbuilding of a world that should never have needed to exist. The connection between this ending nightmare and the beginning of the hunter's own journey becomes palpable. The dreamlands are not separate, discrete realms. They are overlapping frequencies, and the silencing of one powerful signal allows others to be heard more clearly. A hunter, standing on the fading shore, might feel a sudden, sharp pull from the moon presence's dream, a reminder of their own contract and the pale blood that binds them. They might smell, just for an instant, the faint aroma of the hunter's dream's field of flowers, a scent entirely alien to this briny air. It is a reminder that their work is not yet done, that other nightmares, other cycles persist. But this one, the foundational one, is complete. The sin against Kos and her child was the original knot in the tangled thread of Ihanam's fate, and with its untying, the entire weave of reality feels just a little bit looser, a little less constrictive. Back in the waking world, the changes are subtle, felt in the marrow, and the soul rather than seen with the eyes. A scholar in Byrgenwerth, poring over a forbidden text, might suddenly feel a chill, a sense of a foundational error in their lineage's philosophy, though they could never articulate it. A healing church priest, administering blood to a sick citizen, might pause for a fraction of a second, his hand trembling with a subconscious memory of the parasitized sauce from which his miracle flows. The beasts in the street, in the quiet moments between their frenzied attacks, might seem less filled with mindless rage and more with a profound, bestial sadness, as if the core of their affliction has been subtly altered. The world does not heal, for the scourge of the beast is a biological and spiritual fact, but the metaphysical anger behind it, the curse that fed its endlessness, has been placated. And what of the great ones, those lonely, cosmic beings? The universe is vast, and its rulers are distant, their motivations and perceptions beyond human comprehension. Yet, the concept of sympathy is woven into their nature. In the wake of the Orphan's release, a quiet might have fallen over certain celestial spheres. The moon presence, orchestrating its endless hunt from its pale dream, might have felt a slight, almost imperceptible shift in the balance of things, a lessening of a certain type of anguish that had long flavored the psychic atmosphere it manipulates. Edon, the formless voice existing only in blood and sound, might have perceived the cessation of one particular, piercing cry that had echoed in its voiceless realm. They are not moved to action, for their scales are eons and galaxies, but they are not entirely insensate. The resolution of a tragedy of this magnitude is a significant event, even on a cosmic scale. It is a demonstration that the tiny, fleeting lives they sometimes notice can, on rare occasions, perform acts of profound consequence, not just transgression, but atonement. Not just destruction, but the granting of peace. The shore of the fishing hamlet is now the last fragment of the nightmare in existence. It floats in a sea of softly glowing mist, the cosmos visible in all directions. The cliffs, the huts, the pebbled beach, and the silent form of Kos are all that remain, an island of memory in an ocean of forgetting. The transition is nearly complete. The very air is becoming thin, bereft of the substance that gives dreams their reality. Soon, this place too will fade. It will not be destroyed, but returned to the raw material of the dreamlands, its story absorbed into the collective unconscious of the world, to be remembered only in the half-forgotten whispers of the sea in the waking world's harbors, and in the quiet, unresolved guilt that sometimes stirs in the hearts of those who dream of pale, vast shapes in deep water. The long, mournful story told in the quiet hours is reaching its final, whispered syllables, leaving behind a silence that is not an end, but a different kind of beginning. The final moments of the hamlet's existence are not marked by a grand cataclysm, but by a gradual, almost tender, relinquishment. The pearlescent light from the sky begins to bleed at the edges, diffusing into the surrounding void, its soft glow mingling with the cold, ancient light of distant stars now visible through the thinning fabric of the dream. These are not the stars known to astronomers. They are the faint, watchful eyes of other realities, other nightmares, other dreams dreaming themselves into being. They cast no shadow and offer no warmth, but their presence is a comfort, a reminder that this small, sorrowful world was not alone in the vastness, only isolated by the intensity of its own pain. The sea, that great gray witness, is the last element to hold its form. Its waves continue their rhythm, but each crest seems to break with less conviction, the water losing its substance, becoming a ghost of itself, a luminous, shimmering mist that retains the motion of the ocean, but not its weight. The sound it makes is no longer a crash or a murmur, but a sigh, a long, drawn-out exhalation that seems to come from the cosmos itself. The salt smell fades, replaced by the scent of ozone and cold stone, the blank aroma of the spaces between worlds. The black pebbles of the shore begin to lose their individual edges, blending into a smooth, dark plain that reflects the starlight like polished obsidian. It is as if the world is being returned to a state of potential, its specific history being gently sanded away, leaving only the smooth, featureless material of possibility. The villages are the last to fade. They do not vanish in a flash of light or a wisp of smoke. They simply become still, their forms settling into the landscape like stones sinking into a pond. Their fish-like features soften, the details of their sorrowful faces blurring, until they are no longer individuals, but mere suggestions of figures, silhouettes etched against the dying light. Then, even these silhouettes begin to bleed into the environment, their dark outlines merging with the darkening cliffs. their silent vigil becoming one with the eternal quiet of the place. They do not die, for they were never truly alive in this nightmare. They were memories given form, and now that the remembering is over, the forms are no longer needed. Their purpose has been served. The story has been told. Kos remains until the very end. Her monumental form is the anchor, and it holds fast as everything else dissolves around it. She seems to gather the fading light unto herself, her pale body glowing with a soft, internal radiance, a final, gentle luminescence that pushes back against the encroaching dark of the void. In these last seconds, she is more beautiful and more terrible than ever before. The sheer scale of her, the complexity of her coral-like structures, the profound silence of her being, it all coalesces into an image of such overwhelming majesty that it transcends sorrow and enters the realm of the sublime. She is a mountain range of bone and memory, a coastline of lost divinity, and for a heartbeat that stretches into an eternity, she is the only real thing in all of existence. Then, she too begins to change. It is not a dissolution, but a transfiguration. The solidity of her form becomes fluid, the hard edges of her body softening, flowing like molten pearl. She loses her specific shape, the curve of a fin, the arch of a rib, and becomes a river of soft, white light, a slow-moving nebula of pure significance. This river of light does not stream away into the void. It simply expands, thinning out, its essence permeating the fabric of the dissolving dream. It is as if she is returning her borrowed substance to the universe, her physical form giving way to her true nature as an idea, a concept, a permanent part of the metaphysical landscape. The last tangible piece of her to vanish is the great, ragged wound. It does not close, but unravels, its darkness spreading out like ink in water until it is indistinguishable from the star-dusted void. And with that, the final, physical evidence of the transgression is gone. Only the memory remains, and the lesson. The silence that follows is absolute. It is the silence of a page after the last word of a story has been read. It is the silence of a room after a candle has been extinguished. It is the deep, resonant silence of the cosmos, which is not an absence of sound, but the presence of a reality too vast for sound to traverse. There is no shore, no sea, no sky. There is only the infinite, quiet dark, punctuated by the cold, indifferent fires of stars that have witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. The hunter's nightmare is over. Its energy has been spent, its purpose fulfilled. The curse that bound it, the grief that fueled it, has been acknowledged, confronted, and finally, mercifully, released. For the hunter who witnessed this, the experience is imprinted not on the mind, but on the soul. The memory of the hamlet, of the orphan's cries, of Kos's silent majesty, will not come to them as a clear narrative. It will come as a feeling, a profound, unshakable melancholy that will color their every action from this moment on. It will be the taste of salt on their tongue when they are weary, the sound of distant waves in their dreams, the sight of a vast, pale shape in the corner of their vision that is gone when they turn to look. They have walked through the origin of their world's sin and have participated in its closure. They have seen the cost of the blood that runs through their veins and the insight that burns behind their eyes. They carry the knowledge that their hunt, for all its necessity, is part of a cycle that began with an act of profound violation, and that the only true victory is not in the killing of beasts, but in the granting of peace to the most innocent of victims. This knowledge changes the nature of the hunt itself. When they next raise their weapon against a shambling, tormented beast, they will not see just a monster. They will see a consequence. They will see the end of a long, tangled chain that leads back to a quiet fishing village and a butchered god. The beast's rage will seem less like mindless fury and more like a distorted echo of the orphan's pain. This does not make the hunter hesitate. The beast must still be culled, the streets must be cleared, but it instills the act with a new, somber gravity. The hunt is no longer a frenzied purge. It is a funerary rite, a necessary step in managing a catastrophe that can never be fully undone. Every beast felled is a small, bloody prayer for a peace that can never truly be won, only endlessly sought. In the waking world of Ihanam, the night continues as it always does. The church bells toll, the beasts howl, the hunters hunt. But for those with the insight to perceive it, the air feels different. The metallic tang of blood is still there, the pervasive fear, the creeping madness. But beneath it all, there is a new, faint undercurrent, a sense of a debt partially paid, a weight slightly lifted. It is not enough to save the city. The scourge will continue, the moon will hang low and heavy, and the dreams of men will still birth horrors. But the foundational scream that had been ringing silently through the collective unconscious of Ihanam since the days of Byrgenwerth has been stilled. The world has been, in some small, essential way, retuned. The song it sings is still a dirge, but the note of absolute, inconsolable despair has been removed from the composition. And in the hunter's dream, the doll, who is more than she appears, might pause in her eternal vigil. She might turn her porcelain face toward a point in the sky where no star shines, her blank eyes seeming to perceive something distant and final. A subtle shift might occur in her demeanor, a slight softening of her perpetual, gentle sorrow. She might, as she tends the white flowers, brush her fingers against their petals with a new tenderness, as if remembering a different Shaw, a different silence. She does not speak of it, for she is a creature of purpose, not of confession. But she feels it. The world of dreams is her domain, and the unmaking of one of its most powerful and tragic realms is an event that resonates through her very being. She understands, in her way, that a long, painful story has reached its conclusion, and that the hunter who stands before her, marked by pale blood and endless night, has been its final author. The cosmos continues its slow, inevitable expansion. The great ones, in their lonely splendor, turn their attentions to other matters, other prayers, other cycles of call and response. The silence left by the hunter's nightmare is quickly filled by the whispers of other dreams, the birth cries of other nightmares. But for a time, in the quiet spaces between thoughts, in the deep, forgotten corners of the collective unconscious, there existed a perfect, peaceful silence where once there was only a child's endless weeping. It was a silence that spoke of an ending, and in that ending, a fragile, bittersweet kind of victory, not over monsters or gods, but over the perpetuation of a pain that had lasted for far too long. The hunt would go on, but it would no longer be fueled by that particular ancient grief. The nightmare was over. All that remained was the long, slow dawn of a world learning to live with its scars. The long, slow dawn is a relative term in a city where the sun is a forgotten concept, a faded memory from a time before the blood, before the healing church's spires cast their long, grasping shadows over every cobblestone and corner. In Ihanam, the dawn is merely a slight lightening of the perpetual gloom, a shift from the profound black of a fresh corpse to the bruised purple-gray of an old one. The air, thick with the miasma of old incense, rotting timber, and the iron-rich scent of spilled blood, does not freshen. It simply stirs, as if the city itself is turning in its fitful sleep. The night's horrors retreat, not vanquished, but sated, slinking back into the sewers, the abandoned workshops, the boarded-up cathedrals, to digest their feast and dream their own bestial dreams until the moon's influence grows strong once more. For the hunter who has returned from the fading shore of the nightmare, this familiar gloom feels different. The very particles of dust, motes dancing in the feeble light, filtering through a broken, stained glass window, seem to hold a new significance. Each one is a tiny world, a microcosm of the greater tragedy, carrying the memory of ancient scholars, of desperate prayers, of the salt spray of a distant, vanished sea. The hunter's steps, once driven by a frantic, desperate purpose, now feel heavier, more deliberate. The weight of the trick weapon on their back is not just the weight of steel and mechanism. It is the weight of history, of complicity. They walk through the deserted streets, past the corpses of beasts and the occasional, still smoldering pyre, and they see not just a city in decay, but a living museum of a single, catastrophic era. The Gothic arches of the buildings no longer seem like testaments to human achievement, but like the rib cages of some colossal, deceased beast. The city itself, a skeleton picked clean by the scavengers of ambition. This newfound perception is a form of insight far more profound than the mere ability to see the amygdalae clinging to the cathedral spires. That was a revelation of the eyes, a shocking expansion of the visible spectrum. This is a revelation of the soul, a quiet, devastating understanding that seeps into the bones and alters one's very relationship with reality. The hunter understands now that the blood they so readily administer from vials is not a simple cure or a mere source of power. It is a sacrament drawn from a dead, parasitized god. Each crimson droplet is a tiny, concentrated echo of the Fishing Hamlet, a physical fragment of Kos's violated body. To inject it is to partake in the original sin, to willingly stain oneself with the very substance of the transgression. The surge of vitality it brings is not a pure gift. It is a loan from a grave, and the interest is paid in the slow, creeping madness of the beast, the very scourge the blood was meant to cure. This is the central, inescapable paradox of Ihanam. The medicine is the disease, the path to transcendence is the road to damnation, and the only way to fight the fire is to pour more of the same cursed fuel upon it. The hunter's journey now takes on the quality of a pilgrimage, a walk through a landscape of consequences. The central Ihanam aqueduct, where the first, terrifying mobs of beasts gathered, is no longer just a chaotic battlefield. It is a testament to the failure of the church's healing. These were once people, citizens who sought a cure for their ailments and instead received a different kind of sickness, one that twisted their bodies and devoured their minds. Their rage is not merely bestial. It is the fury of the betrayed, the anger of those who were promised salvation and given a monster's form. The cleric beast, a once holy man now mutated into a shambling, roaring horror, is not just a boss to be overcome. It is a walking cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when the human form is forced to contain a power it was never meant to hold. Its pathetic, anguished cries are the last, distorted vestiges of a prayer that went unanswered, or worse, was answered in the most horrific way possible. Ascending to the cathedral ward, the heart of the healing church's power, the atmosphere grows even more thick with unspoken history. The grand, sweeping plazas and towering spires are not symbols of divine favor, but monuments to a lie built upon a corpse. Every stone, every statue of a pious, faceless cleric feels like a deliberate effort to bury the truth, to pave over the bloody shawl with marble and dogma. The vicars who once preached here did so with the blood of Kos flowing through their veins, their enlightenment purchased with the suffering of her child. The hunter, carrying the memory of the orphan's final, plaintive whisper, can almost hear the hypocrisy ringing in the silent halls, a high-pitched, psychic frequency of guilt that has soaked into the very masonry. The white church hunters, with their antiseptic garb and their precise, surgical strikes, are not noble defenders of the faith. They are the janitors of this lie, tasked with cleaning up the mess their superiors created, their clinical efficiency a stark contrast to the organic, weeping horror at the source of the plague they fight. And then there is the Byrgenwerth College, the quiet, crumbling origin point of it all. Nestled by the moonlit lake, it seems deceptively peaceful, a place of quiet scholarship fallen into disrepair. But to the hunter who has walked the nightmare, its silence is deafening. This is where the first, fateful decision was made. Here, in these dusty libraries and sealed lecture halls, the scholars of Byrgenwerth looked upon the cosmos not with wonder, but with avarice. They saw the potential for evolution, for ascension, and they deemed any cost acceptable. The discovery of the chalice dungeons and the old blood within was not a miracle. It was a temptation, and they failed the test. The spider patches of the lecture building, the failed experiments that skitter in the darkness, are the intellectual children of that failure. They are the literal and figurative spawn of a philosophy that prized insight above humanity, that saw the human form as something to be discarded on the path to becoming something greater. Master Willem, sitting in his chair, pointing silently toward the lake, is not a wise guide offering cryptic advice. He is a ruined king, the architect of a catastrophe, his body petrified, and his mind lost in the very cosmos he sought to conquer. His silent gesture is not an answer, but an admission of defeat, a final, futile pointing toward the source of his own damnation. The lake itself, vast and placid, reflects the cold, white disk of the moon. But for the hunter, it also reflects the memory of another body of water, the gray, churning sea of the hamlet. The confrontation with Rom, the vacuous spider, hidden in the moonlit lake, takes on a new, tragic dimension. Rom is not a malevolent guardian. She is a seal, a living barrier created by the church to block the truth, to keep the red moon from hanging low and revealing the horrific reality of their actions. Her vacuity, her mindless, peaceful floating, is a manufactured ignorance. She is a bulwark against the nightmare, but in being so, she also prevents the world from confronting the sin that created it. To defeat her is to tear down this last, fragile wall, to allow the full, bloody truth of the world to come pouring in. It is a necessary act, a violent awakening, but it is also a deeply sorrowful one. Rom was a person once, perhaps a scholar of Byrgenwerth, who was transformed into this placid, brainless creature as part of the cover-up. Her death is a mercy killing, the silencing of a living lie, and as she dissolves into arcane mist, the sky bleeds red, and the unseen world reveals its screaming, monstrous face. The truth, once known, cannot be unknown. The hunter has pulled back the curtain, and the audience must now behold the terrible machinery behind the illusion. This unveiling leads the hunter deeper into the heart of the mystery, to Yahar'gul, the unseen village. This is where the church's philosophy curdles into its most overt and horrific form. The air here crackles with a malevolent energy. The streets are patrolled by nightmarish amalgamations of flesh and metal, and the very stones of the buildings seem to weep blood. The Mensis ritual, conducted by the school of Mensis, is the logical, insane conclusion of Byrgenwerth's original quest. It is an attempt to forcibly contact a great one, to ascend through a brutal, sacrificial ceremony. The piles of corpses, the cages, the mutilated bodies strung up like grotesque decorations. This is not the byproduct of the ritual. It is the ritual. It is a philosophy of transcendence through absolute, utter violation, a dark mirror of the original sin in the Fishing Hamlet. The one reborn, a monstrous entity stitched together from countless corpses and summoned from the sky, is the perfect symbol of this school of thought. It is not a birth, but an assembly. Not a creation, but a desecration given a blasphemous, shambling life. To fight, it is to combat the very idea that power can be cobbled together from the suffering of others, that godhood can be manufactured in a slaughterhouse. And waiting at the end of this path, in the nightmare of Mensis, is Mikolash, the host of the nightmare. His is a different kind of tragedy, where the orphan's suffering was pure and elemental. Mikolash's is the madness of the obsessed scholar, the intellect that has chased a secret for so long that it has become unmoored from reality itself. He is not a powerful, menacing figure. He is a pathetic, cackling wretch, running through the endless, mirrored halls of his own mind, endlessly reciting the fragments of law that have consumed him. His famous cry, Kos, or some say Kosm, is not a statement of power, but a testament to his failure to understand. He has read the notes, he has performed the rituals, he has sacrificed countless lives, but he has never truly understood the nature of the being he invokes. He seeks the audience of a great one, but he comprehends nothing of their sorrow, their loneliness, their sympathetic nature. He is a child playing with equations for a cosmic force, unaware that the force is a grieving mother. His nightmare is a sterile, intellectual hell, a labyrinth of his own making, and his final, frantic monologue before his death is the sound of a mind breaking against a truth it is too arrogant to grasp. Each of these encounters, each of these locations, is a piece of the same sprawling, interconnected narrative. The hunter is not merely moving through a world. They are moving through an argument, a philosophical debate conducted with weapons and blood. The world of Bloodborne is a world without easy answers, where every potential path to salvation is revealed to be a different road to damnation. The healing church's path leads to the beastly scourge. Byrgenwerth's path leads to the empty insight of Rom and the madness of Mikolash. The path of the Vilebloods of Canehurst offers a different kind of transcendence, one of corrupted royalty and an eternal, parasitic existence, a hollow immortality built on the blood of others. There is no pure, uncorrupted choice. The universe, as revealed by the story of Kos, is fundamentally dualistic, and to engage with it is to accept that duality, to be stained by it. The hunter's own role in this is deeply ambiguous. Are they a liberator, breaking the cycles of curse and nightmare? Or are they merely the latest, most effective instrument of the moon presence, another pawn in a different great one's inscrutable game? The hunter's dream, with its field of silent, white flowers and its ever-watchful doll, is a gilded cage. Jayaman, the first hunter, sleeps fitfully within it, trapped between life and death. His own story, a tangled web of regret and loss connected to the events in the Fishing Hamlet. His offer of release, to be freed from the dream and woken in the waking world, is a tempting one. But it is a false dawn. To accept it is to forget, to have the memories of the nightmare of Kos, of the orphan, scrubbed from one's mind. It is to return to a state of ignorance, to become just another Ihanamite, unaware of the horrific truths that underpin their reality. It is a peace bought with willful blindness, a surrender to the very illusion the hunter has spent their entire journey shattering. The other path is to refuse, to challenge Jayaman, and in doing so, challenge the moon presence itself. This is not a battle for glory, but a rebellion against the very architecture of the hunt. To defeat Jaemin is to see the profound sadness in his final moments, to understand that he, too, is a victim, a man trapped in a cycle of violence he helped start. And then to face the moon presence, that pale, skeletal, cosmic puppet master, is to confront the entity that has been using the hunt and the hunters for its own unknowable purposes. Its arrival is a descent of pure cosmic indifference, a being that sees the hunter not as a person, but as a tool, a vessel. The battle is a silent, terrifying dance against a force of nature, a struggle for agency in a universe that seems designed to deny it. And there is a third, most esoteric ending. To consume the umbilical cords, the fragments of a great one's essence, is to perform a ritual of one's own. It is to ingest the very substance of the cosmos, to force an evolution, to become an infant great one. This is the ultimate ambition of Byrgenwerth and the healing church realized, but not in the way they intended. It is not a transcendence granted by a god, but one seized by force. When the hunter defeats the moon presence and is reborn as a squirming, pale infant, cradled by the doll, the outcome is deeply ambiguous. Is this a victory? Has the hunter broken free of the cycles and achieved a new, independent existence? Or have they simply become the newest resident in the cosmos's menagerie of lonely, sympathetic beings, destined to yearn and lose like all the others? The doll's gentle cradling is not necessarily a mother's love. It is the sympathy of a caretaker for a new, nascent god, one whose future is as uncertain and potentially tragic as that of the Orphan of Kos. The hunter has not escaped the story. They have become a new chapter in it, their humanity shed like a skin, their new form a vessel for a destiny they cannot yet comprehend. The world of Bloodborne offers no clean resolutions, no triumphant returns to a restored world. The dawn, when it comes, is always tinged with blood. The city of Ihanam remains, a carcass picked over by crows and beasts, its secrets buried but not erased. The hunter, whether they wake in the morning sun, take Jaemin's place in the dream, or ascend to become a newborn great one, carries the weight of what they have learned. They have walked through the memory of a crime and participated in its reckoning. They have seen that the pursuit of knowledge without wisdom or empathy leads only to horror. They have learned that the divine is not a thing of pure light, but a complex, often terrible reality that encompasses both nurturing abundance and parasitic decay. And they understand, on the most fundamental level, that the true horror is not the beast lurking in the dark, but the human capacity for transgression and the long, sorrowful chain of consequences that a single, unforgivable act can unleash upon the world, cursing it for generations, until a lone hunter finally walks a desolate shore and offers a moment of peace to a weeping child. The hunt is over, but the silence it leaves behind is filled with the echoes of all that was lost, a quiet, enduring testament to the price of touching the stars. The echoes of that peace, the silence of the shore, do not vanish from the hunter's mind so much as they settle, a sediment of profound melancholy at the bottom of their consciousness. It becomes the foundational layer upon which all new experiences are built, a quiet hum beneath the screams of beasts and the clamor of battle. As they move through the twisted, gothic spires of the upper cathedral ward, the memory of Kos's vast, silent form is a stark contrast to the cloying, aggressive darkness that dwells here. This is not the natural, organic quiet of the ocean's depth, but a manufactured silence, a void created to hide something terrible. The air is cold in a way that has nothing to do with temperature. It is the chill of absolute negation, of a place where life has been systematically excised to make room for something else, something that feasts on what remains. The celestial emissaries, with their bloated, childlike forms and their mindless, waving arms, are a perversion of the kinship the Hamlet villagers shared with Kos. Where the villagers were elevated through a symbiotic, reverent relationship, these beings are the products of forced evolution, of an ideology that seeks to hammer humanity into a shape that can hold cosmic insight, regardless of the cost. Their cheerful, gurgling sounds in the midst of such profound desolation are more horrifying than any beast's roar. They are happy because they have been emptied, their minds scoured clean of the very humanity the church purported to elevate. They are not kin, they are puppets, their strings pulled by the same cold intellect that orchestrated the research hall's atrocities. To walk among them is to witness the end result of a philosophy that sees the human soul as an impediment to enlightenment, a flaw to be corrected. The vast, star-dusted void visible through the broken ceiling of the orphanage feels like a mockery of the cosmic expanse, a sterile canvas compared to the living, breathing cosmos that Kos embodied. And then, in the deepest dark, behind a door that seems to absorb all light and sound, awaits Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. She is a different kind of great one, a being not of the ocean's abyss, but left behind, forgotten by her kin. Her presence is one of immense, lonely sorrow, a grief that is not angry or vengeful, but simply vast and enduring. She does not attack with the orphan's frantic rage or the moon presence's predatory grace. Her movements are slow, almost ponderous, weighed down by an eternity of solitude. The healing church found her here in this dark chamber, and instead of offering reverence or seeking understanding, they built their entire religion around her, using her blood, her essence, as the cornerstone of their power. She is their captive god, a weeping source of miracles, her tears literally crystallized into the very arcane tools the hunters use. To stand before her is to see another facet of the Great One's tragedy. Where Kos was violated in death, Ebrietas is exploited in life. She is a prisoner, a fountain of divine power that the church drinks from, yet they understand nothing of her nature, her loneliness, her silent, patient despair. Her attacks are not assaults, they are lamentations given physical form. The shimmering, star-filled arcane projectiles are not weapons, but tears, each one a fragment of her isolated, cosmic grief. The charge across the chamber is not an attempt to destroy, but a desperate, clumsy effort to bridge the impossible gap between her existence and theirs. A failed embrace from a being whose very touch is cataclysmic to humanity. When she is finally still, her massive, pale form slumped in the darkness, the silence that returns is different from the one in the hamlet. It is not a silence of peace or release, but of a sorrow so deep it has no sound. The church's most sacred source of power is a weeping, abandoned child of the stars, and they have been milking her sorrow for generations, bottling her grief and calling it enlightenment. The hunter, standing over her, feels not the catharsis of a finished task, but the heavy weight of complicity in yet another form of desecration. They have not freed her, they have merely added their own violence to the long history of it. She remains a perpetual daughter, forever separated from the cosmos that spawned her, her only companions the madmen who worship the blood they draw from her side. This pattern repeats, again and again, a fractal of tragedy. In the hidden, rotten depths of the old hunter's nightmare, within the very heart of the burning, eternal Ihanam, the hunter encounters Ludwig, the holy blade. Once a champion of the church, a figure of legend, he is now a grotesque fusion of man and steed, a creature of such profound physical horror that it seems to defy the very laws of form. But the true horror is not his appearance. It is the moment, in the heat of battle, when the hunter severs the grotesque, beastly head from the twisted body, and the creature that was Ludwig finds a moment of lucidity. His voice, when it comes, is not a beast's snarl, but the refined, sorrowful tone of a lost scholar, a fallen hero. He asks, his words choked with a confusion that is more painful than any rage, if his church hunters, the ones he led, embodied the justice and the righteousness he so fervently believed in. In that moment, the hunter is not facing a monster. They are facing the shattered ghost of a man's ideals, a man who dedicated his life to a cause that was, from its very inception, founded on a lie and baptized in innocent blood. The holy moonlight sword he wielded, a weapon of otherworldly beauty and power, is a stark contrast to the bloody reality of the hunt he led. It is a symbol of the ideal, the pure, noble purpose he thought he served, while his mutated body is the truth, the horrific, beastly reality of that service. His final, peaceful acceptance of death, believing his hunters to have been noble, is perhaps the greatest tragedy of all a good man, damned by a truth he never knew, dying with a beautiful lie on his lips. Each of these encounters is a thread, and as the hunter pulls on them, the entire tapestry of Ihanam begins to unravel, revealing not a simple pattern of good and evil, but a complex, interwoven design of ambition, folly, and the desperate, often destructive, human yearning for meaning in a cosmos that seems profoundly indifferent. The world is not sick because of a random plague. It is sick because of a choice, a series of choices made by people who saw the stars and wanted to possess them. The beastly scourge is not an external infection. It is the internal, biological, and spiritual consequence of ingesting a power that was never meant for humanity. It is the body and soul rebelling against a forced evolution, the human essence refusing to be erased, even if that refusal manifests as a mindless, rampaging beast. The hunter's journey, then, becomes a process of mapping this sickness, of walking the length and breadth of the symptom to understand the disease. The chalice dungeons, those labyrinthine tombs buried deep beneath the city, are the ultimate expression of this. They are not mere optional challenges. They are the archaeological record, the stratified layers of the world's illness. To descend into them is to go backwards in time, to walk through the grave of civilizations that came before. Civilizations that also sought the blood and were consumed by it. The Pethumerians, with their ghostly queens and their monstrous guardians, are a mirror of Ihanaam's own future. They too communed with the Great Ones. They too sought transcendence. And they too fell, their grand cities becoming lightless catacombs, their people transformed into the very guardians of their own tombs. Queen Ihanaam herself, the pale-blood queen, stands as a silent, sorrowful spectre, a figure from a past cycle of the same tragedy, her own story of a lost child echoing the central, repeating motif of the narrative. The hunter, fighting through the descendants of her people, is not exploring a different story, but an earlier verse of the same endless song. The curse is not new, it is ancient. Ihanaam is not the first city to be built upon this terrible foundation. It is merely the latest. This cyclical nature of the horror imbues every action with a sense of profound futility. Is the hunter truly changing anything, or are they merely the latest actor in a play that has been performed countless times before? The world is dense with the ghosts of previous hunters, previous scholars, previous civilizations, all of whom reached for the stars and were burned by them. The messengers, those small, pale, helpful creatures that serve the hunter in the dream, are themselves a mystery. Are they the spirits of dead children, as some item descriptions hint? Are they the first, failed attempts at creating kin? Their silent, waving, almost worshipful attitude towards the hunter adds another layer of poignant sadness to the journey. They are helpers, but they are also witnesses, a silent chorus observing the latest iteration of a timeless tragedy. As the hunter gathers the pieces of the puzzle, the umbilical cords, the fragments of true great ones, they are not just collecting powerful items. They are assembling the key to a lock that few have ever seen. To consume them is to perform the ultimate act of transgression, to ingest the essence of godhood itself. The physical sensation is not of power, but of a terrible, unraveling understanding. It is not an enlightenment that clarifies, but one that complicates, that reveals the infinite, terrifying complexity of the cosmos and the insignificant, fleeting nature of the human perspective. The hunter's own body begins to feel like a cage, a poorly designed vessel for a consciousness that is expanding beyond its limits. The world seen with this level of insight is a terrifying place, a landscape of overlapping realities, where the ghosts of the past are as real as the beasts of the present, and the lines between dream and waking, life and death, become blurred into irrelevance. It is the final, brutal price of knowledge. To see the world as it truly is, in all its beautiful, horrifying, and indifferent complexity. And to understand that humanity's place in it is both profoundly insignificant and, through its capacity for both transgression and atonement, uniquely consequential. The hunter becomes a living paradox, a human who has gazed upon the infinite and must now find a way to carry on within the painfully finite confines of their own flesh, their weapon, and their purpose. The final confrontation, when it arrives, is not heralded by thunder or the splitting of the sky, but by a deepening of the silence that has been the hunter's constant companion since the shore faded from memory. It is a silence that has weight and texture, a velvet shroud laid over the world, muffling the distant howls of beasts and the ever-present drip of water in the sewers, until they are nothing more than the faint, arrhythmic pulse of a dying heart. The air in the hunter's dream is preternaturally still. The field of white flowers, usually trembling in some unfelt breeze, is frozen, each petal holding its position as if carved from alabaster. The doll stands at her usual post, but her stillness is different, more profound, a suspension of animation that feels less like waiting and more like a held breath before a plunge into deep water. She does not speak. She simply watches, her porcelain face a perfect, unreadable mask. Yet her presence seems to hum with a knowing anticipation, a silent acknowledgement that the final thread of this long, tangled tale is about to be pulled. Jayaman sleeps in his wheelchair as he always has, but his slumber is restless. His bony fingers twitch against the worn wood of the armrests, and soft, incoherent murmurs escape his lips, fragments of old regrets and older fears. To approach him is to feel the temperature drop, a cold that has nothing to do with the night air and everything to do with the chill of a life suspended. A soul trapped in a gilded cage of its own making. He is the first hunter, a figure of legend, but up close. He is a collection of sharp angles and deep sorrows, a man worn down to his essence by centuries of violence and regret. His connection to the Fishing Hamlet, to Maria, to the original sin, is a chain wrapped tightly around his spirit, and the dream is its anchor. When he stirs, when his single, good eye opens and fixes upon the hunter, there is no hostility in his gaze, only a deep, bottomless weariness, a longing for an end that has been denied him for so long he has almost forgotten what it means. His voice, when it comes, is like the rustle of dead leaves. Tonight, Jayaman joins the hunt. It is not a boast nor a threat. It is a statement of tragic fact, a resignation to the endless cycle. He rises from his chair, his body unfolding with a series of painful-sounding cracks and pops, the sound of old machinery being forced into motion one last time. He reaches for his burial blade, a weapon of terrifying elegance and cruel purpose, its curved blade a sliver of a scything moon. The fight that follows is not a clash of brute force, but a macabre, graceful dance. Jayaman moves with the eerie, flowing speed of a spectre, his attacks a whirlwind of silver and death, each sweep of his blade singing a mournful dirge through the still air. He is not trying to kill the hunter out of malice. He is offering them the same release he so desperately craves for himself, the sweet oblivion of a clean death that will sever their connection to the dream and wipe the slate of their memory clean. To be killed by Jayaman is to be granted the mercy of forgetting, to wake up in the waking world with the horrors of Ihanam, the sorrow of the Hamlet, the silent majesty of Kos, all faded into the vague, troubled stuff of a half-remembered nightmare. But to refuse this mercy, to fight back, to press the attack against this broken, legendary figure, is to engage in a dialogue of violence that speaks of a refusal to forget. Every parry, every dodge, every strike of the hunter's own weapon is a statement. I have seen. I have learned. I will not go quietly into that ignorant dawn. The battle becomes a physical argument between the desire for peace through oblivion and the burden of carrying the truth. As Jayaman's strength wanes, his movements become less fluid, more desperate. The graceful dance devolves into a ragged, painful struggle. He begins to weep great, heaving sobs that rack his frail frame, his attacks becoming wild, less precise, infused with the raw emotion he has spent a lifetime suppressing. He is not just fighting for his purpose anymore. He is fighting against the rising tide of his own remembered grief, the ghost of Lady Maria, the screams of the Hamlet villagers, the sight of Kos upon the shore. When the final blow lands, it is not a moment of triumph, but one of profound, heart-breaking solemnity. Jayaman does not cry out in pain. He simply slumps to the ground, his body seeming to shrink, all the legend and the horror draining out of him, leaving behind only a very old, very tired man. He looks up at the hunter, his one eye clear for a moment, free of its centuries of pain. Dear, dear, what was it? The hunt, the blood, or the horrible dream? He whispers, his voice barely audible. Oh, it doesn't matter. It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sort of messes. His words are a final, weary exhalation of the philosophy that has damned him. He sees himself, even now, as merely a helper, a tool, his own immense suffering just another mess to be managed. Then he offers a final, gentle kindness. Tonight, Jayaman joins the hunt. He repeats, and this time it is a promise of his own release. His head bows and his body goes still, finally, truly at rest. The first hunter is free. The silence that follows is deeper than any that has come before, a silence that seems to absorb the very concept of sound. But the dream is not over. The puppet master remains. As if summoned by the vacuum of Jayaman's passing, the moon presence descends. It does not crash into the dream, it manifests, its arrival a violation of physics and sense. There is no sound, only a sudden, overwhelming pressure. A feeling of being in the presence of something so vast and so alien that the human mind struggles to even register it as a physical form. It is a thing of bone and pallid flesh, a skeletal, writhing anatomy that evokes both a flayed nervous system and a monstrous, parasitic insect. Its limbs are too long, its movements a series of jerky, unnatural contortions. It has no face, only a smooth, blank expanse where features should be. And from its back erupts a single, massive, fleshy wing, tattered and useless. This is the entity that has been pulling the strings, the source of the hunter's dream, the architect of the hunt that has consumed Ihanam. It is not a god of wrath or vengeance. It is a force of nature, a cosmic mechanism, its motives as inscrutable and impersonal as the orbit of a planet or the fusion of a star. Its presence is pure, undiluted indifference. It does not hate the hunter. It does not even see the hunter as an individual. The hunter is a tool, a favored puppet that has outlived its predecessor. The moon presence's goal is simple, instinctual. To claim the hunter, to bind them to the dream as the new host, the new Jayaman, to ensure the cycle continues. It approaches not with malice, but with a kind of cold, biological imperative, reaching out with its grotesquely elongated limbs to embrace the hunter, to absorb them into its being, to hollow them out and fill them with the purpose of the endless hunt. The battle against it is unlike any other. It is not a test of skill, but a test of will, a struggle against assimilation into a vast, uncaring system. The creature's attacks are not techniques. They are physiological reactions, discharges of cosmic energy, eruptions of its very blood that seek to drain the hunter's vitality and bind them closer. The air crackles with pale, spectral light, and the very ground of the dream seems to writhe in sympathy with the entity's form. To fight it is to rebel against the very fabric of one's reality, to declare that one will not be a cog in a machine, even a machine of divine design. If the hunter falls here, the cycle is preserved. They become the new host, the new keeper of the dream, doomed to sleep fitfully in a wheelchair for eternity, guiding a new generation of hunters, while the memory of all they have seen and learned slowly fades into a vague, persistent melancholy. It is a fate worse than death, a perpetual twilight of the soul. But if the hunter has consumed the 3/3 umbilical cords, if they have ingested the essence of slain great ones and forced their own consciousness to expand to the very precipice of humanity, the outcome is different. The moon presence's embrace does not result in assimilation. Instead, a violent, transformative reaction occurs. The hunter's body, saturated with the power of other great ones, rejects the moon presence's claim. The entity recoils, not in pain, but in something akin to confusion, a glitch in its cosmic programming. The hunter is no longer a suitable vessel. They have become something else, something outside the intended function of the dream. The fight that follows is the true, final boss battle, a desperate struggle not for survival, but for sovereignty. The hunter is fighting for the right to define their own existence, to escape the predetermined roles of puppet, pawn, or even new master of the hunt. When the moon presence is finally struck down, it does not die in a conventional sense. It simply ceases to maintain its form. Its skeletal structure unravels, its pallid flesh dissolving into a shower of shimmering, pale motes of light that rise into the sky of the dream like a reverse snowfall. There is no final cry, no dramatic collapse. It just ends, its presence retracting from the dream like a tide going out, leaving behind an immense, echoing emptiness. The hunter's dream, bereft of its creator and its host, begins to destabilize. The workshop trembles, the little messengers writhing on the ground before burrowing into the earth for safety. The field of flowers starts to lose its color, the pristine white bleaching into a deathly gray. And then the transformation begins. The hunter, having triumphed over the system, is now consumed by the consequence of their ambition. The power of the umbilical cords, no longer held in check by the struggle, runs rampant. Their human form cannot contain it. The hunter collapses, their body convulsing, not in pain, but in a fundamental cellular rewriting. Bones shift, flesh flows like liquid, the very concept of their physical self being deconstructed and reassembled according to a new, alien blueprint. It is not a process one watches. It is a process one experiences from the inside, a terrifying, exhilarating, and utterly alien sensation of becoming. When it is over, the hunter is gone. In their place, left squirming upon the gray, dying grass, is a small, pale, larval form. It is the infant Great One, a being of nascent, unimaginable power, but also of profound vulnerability and ignorance. It is a newborn god, its consciousness a blank slate, its future an unwritten book. The doll, who has observed all of this with her serene, unchanging demeanor, now approaches. She kneels beside the squirming infant, her movements filled with a tenderness that is both maternal and reverent. She reaches out a delicate porcelain hand and gently gathers the tiny being into her arms, cradling it against her chest. "Ah, you found yourself a hunter," she whispers, her voice the softest of sounds in the crumbling dream. Her words are rich with layered meaning. She is not speaking to the infant, but to the consciousness within it, the ghost of the hunter that now resides in this new form. She has always been more than a mere doll. She is a being of sympathy, crafted by a great one, and now she becomes the caretaker for the newest of their kind. She will raise this infant, guide it, protect it, as it grows into its power and its loneliness. The hunter has achieved the ultimate transcendence sought by Byrgenwerth and the healing church, but they have paid the ultimate price, their humanity. They have become the very thing they studied, hunted, and feared. They are now a great one, a sympathetic spirit in a lonely cosmos, destined to yearn to lose, and to answer the prayers of those below in ways that will likely be just as tragic and misunderstood as the actions of Kos, or Ebrietas, or the moon presence. The final image is of the doll, cradling the infant Great One as the hunter's dream fades to gray around them. The workshop dissolves into mist, the lanterns flicker and die. The messengers fall still, becoming little more than stone carvings. The dream is over, the contract is void. The hunt, for this hunter at least, has reached its true final end. But it is not an end of peace. It is the beginning of a new story, a new cycle on a vastly different and infinitely more lonely scale. The hunter has escaped the nightmare of Ihanam only to be born into the larger, colder, and more enigmatic nightmare of the cosmos itself. The silence is complete, a silence not of an ending, but of a genesis, a quiet so profound it contains within it the potential for infinite new tragedies, infinite new dreams, and the same eternal, sympathetic longing that has echoed through the stars since the beginning of time.